Hi students, today we are working on Module 22. This is lesson 22.4 and it is our last lesson in our Fractions on a Number Line module. Our I can statements for today are I can represent a fraction on a number line between the 0 and 1 interval, and I can represent a fraction on a number line that is greater than 1 whole. These are both skills that we have learned this week, and today we're going to review both of them. If you have a piece of paper and pencil, you will need that. Or if you want to work on a dry erase board, you can do that as well. We're going to start with the review problems. So if you will please draw this number line and make sure you mark your endpoints of 0 and 1. Now, I'd like for you to try to locate the point 2/3 on the number line. 2/3. So think about how will you divide your number line into thirds? How many marks will you have to draw to make thirds? Go ahead and do that now. Now we want to start counting our points on the number line. So label your points that you now have on your number line. And last, how are you going to show where 2/3 is? Remember, you're going to put a dot on the number line to show where 2/3 is. Let's take a look. Did you divide your number line by adding 2 marks in your number line to split it? And remember, you should always count the spaces on the number line between 0 and 1 to see if you have the correct denominator. So if we count our spaces, we have 1, 2, 3. 3 parts for our thirds. We have 0/3. This would be 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3. So did you put your 2/3 mark right here on the number line? I hope so. All right, let's try another one. Go ahead and draw your number line from 0 to 1. And this time, can you locate the point 3/5 on a number line? 3/5. So take a minute, pause the video, and see if you can locate 3/5 on a number line. Did you divide it like this? Did you divide it with 4 marks in the middle of your 0 to 1? And you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces? Did you label your 0/5 and your 5/5? And did you put a mark on 1/5, 2/5, 3/5? Did you put a little dot right here on 3/5? That's how you would show 3/5 on a number line. So here's a different type of problem that you might be given. You might be given a number line that is already divided, and you may be asked, what is the fraction represented by a point on the number line? Now this is a little different because you didn't have to draw the number line. You have to use the one that's given. But remember, we learned how to check our work and check our denominators by counting the spaces on the number line between 0 and 1, between the two whole numbers. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 spaces between 0 and 1, 4 equal parts of the number line. That means this number line represents fourths. Now remember, when you count 0/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. I know I must have done this correctly because 4/4 is by my 1 whole. And I know that if the numerator and denominator are the same number, that is equal to 1 whole. So now if I think about point A and I look at what I counted, point A would represent 1/4 on this number line. All right, let's try one. All right, so if you will look at this number line, and the question is, what fraction is represented by point E on the number line? You go ahead and see if you can figure this one out. Write down your answer. What do you think point E is representing? Think about what would the denominator be, what would the numerator be, and make your answer choice on your paper. Okay, let's see if you're right. So if I count my spaces, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 equal parts between 0 and 1. So if I counted, I would have 0/5, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and 5/5. Remember, to equal 1 whole, 5/5. So I know I labeled that correctly. Did you come up with 3/5? Because point E is representing 3/5 on the number line. Great job. So let's think about some of the things that we know, some important information that we know about fractions. When a fraction is equal to 1 whole, the numerator and denominator will be the same number. For example, 8/8 represents 1 whole. All 8 pieces would represent 1 whole. So here are some examples. 1 whole is equivalent to 4/4, 2/2, 3/3. Numerator and denominator should be the same to be equivalent to 1 whole. We also learned that fractions greater than 1 can be represented on a number line by dividing the number line into equal parts. So we learned that if the numerator is larger than the denominator, that fraction is going to go beyond 1 on the number line because it is bigger than 1 whole. Again, to know if a fraction is greater than 1, the numerator is larger than the denominator. And on the number line, it would be beyond the 1. So now we're going to take all of the information we know and we're just going to practice some more with that today. So if you will please draw a number line on either your dry erase board or your paper, and make sure you have all of these whole numbers. You have 0 to 3. These are going to be our whole numbers. The first thing I want you to do after you draw your number line is I want you to estimate to mark and label 1/2 within the interval 0 to 1. So in this little section from 0 to 1, go ahead and draw where your half mark would be. Remember, to make halves, we only need to draw one line. Okay. So now I want you to label 0/2, 1/2, and 2/2. So number from 0 to 1, number your halves. Now what I'd like you to do is continue your number line. So break from 1 to 2 into halves, and from 2 to 3 into halves. And then continue counting. So here we have 2/2. What would come next? You label your number line, and then we're going to review it together. Take a minute, pause the video. Does your number line and your fractions, or do your number line and your fractions look like this? 0/2, 1/2, 2/2. Remember, 1 whole, 2/2, 3/2, 4/2, 5/2, 6/2. Now, there was another little trick that I showed you yesterday on lesson 22.3, where you can check your whole numbers. If you multiply your whole number times your denominator, you're going to get your numerator. So if I multiply the whole number 2 times my denominator 2, I get 4. I could do that here as well. The whole number is 3. The denominator is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So it works. We did it. Let's try one more. All right, so again, I want you to draw a number line, but this time I want your endpoints to be 1 and 4. Make sure you label your whole numbers. Once you've drawn your number line, I want you to partition each whole into thirds. And then I want you to label all the fractions. Now, I want you to remember, when you're doing this, you're going to work on one section at a time, one interval at a time. So from 1 to 2, I want you to start there. Divide that into thirds, just this section. Then I want you to work from 2 to 3. Divide this section into thirds. And finally, 3 to 4. Divide this section into thirds. Now you have to do some serious thinking. We've divided this line into thirds. Okay, so now what do I start with for one whole? It is not 0 thirds. So what do I start with? 3 thirds. You got it. So if this is 3 thirds, because the equivalent fraction for one whole, the numerator and denominator must be the same, and our denominator is 3 for thirds, it's 3 thirds. Now continue counting. Label all your fractions. Okay, does your number line look like this? Check your number line now. I want you to see, what do all of your fractions have in common? All of them have a 3 in the denominator, right? And all of them have a number, except for your one whole. All of your other fractions have a larger numerator than denominator. 3 thirds. Check and see if you have your fractions right. Remember, we could multiply our whole number, 4, times our denominator, 3, and we should get our numerator of 12. And we do, because 4 times 3 equals 12. You did it. Great job. All right, we have one more example that we're going to do, and then you'll be ready to work on your lesson notes.